Before we get into stage 18, I just want to tip the metaphorical cap to the guys, these riders who went up that last climb yesterday, the Col de Porte, the Col de Portet. My gosh, if you haven't seen the stage and if you don't have access to watch the full coverage, just go and check out some images, pictures, whatever, Flickr or Google Images, something like that. Go check out especially the last, say, 6 to 10 kilometers. Oh my God. I mean, barren, grass only, no trees, rough road the last, whatever, 6, 7, 8 kilometers, where it basically becomes, more rough, gravelly type asphalt. And at points, and of course, the camera gives it a little bit more of kind of a trickery, but at points, when you see these riders, and when Quintana was doing his thing and Dan Martin was trying to catch him, it looked like they were riding up a staircase. That's how steep it is. I mean, it looks literally like they're just going up a staircase. And you can see the pitch where, whatever, they're gaining like 6 feet every 30 feet or something like that. I mean, it's just crazy. And to think that they had to sustain that for 16 kilometers, and then the last portion of it, those last 5, 6 kilometers, where you think, okay, are we done yet? No, you still have another 3.5 miles to go. Amazing. That was a great mountain stage. And they definitely need to include this in future Tour de France's. But my gosh, the masochism, the suffering, and all that pain just for a little bit of glory, or I guess just to say, hey, I survived a Tour de France. I mean, really, that's what it boils down to for most of these riders. On to stage 18. There's still 146 riders, so that's all good. That's pretty much stabilized. Sagan is still in the race. He got banged up, but he's given it a go, and he's riding okay. Demar survived. Demar was not eliminated. And apparently Greipel questioned how Demar did it, and basically laid the accusation that Demar must have cheated or grabbed onto a car and was pulled for a few hundred meters or something like that. No. And apparently immediately either a media member or somebody from the tour who was in a van right behind Demar basically immediately came out in defense of Demar to say it was totally legitimate. Demar got to the finish. He survived the mountains, and, Greipel basically immediately retracted that tweet. So Demar, the French hope, one of the few remaining sprinters, is still in the race. He survived. Don't forget, they're down here in Po. They're down there in southern France. Just keep it in mind for those who are unaware and for those who like to bag on the French. Well, one, they have a long, renowned history, even though, let's say, since the 17 and 1800s, other than their little bump from Napoleon, they were kind of second fiddle to the British. That being said, southern France is huge on rugby. And, go talk shit to a French rugby fan or player, and you're going to have problems the same way. You'll have a problem with the old Scottish soccer hooligans or these Russian soccer football hooligans, and I should say Scottish football hooligans. And then, of course, your typical American football fan who, they'll have a problem if you talk too much shit towards them. Kind of the typical flat stage, one to sit back, enjoy the beauty of France, and enjoy all the phallic symbols they're sticking up, i.e. all those churches, the old church spires, basically a big old phallic symbol sticking up there to basically say, I'm pissing on the ground, or I'm sticking what in the air, and it's visible from 3 to 5 miles away over every one of these little French cities or towns, pretty much marking the territory. We can get into that sometime in the future. 5 guys went out in the breakaway. It was a new mix of riders. It wasn't the De Gents and all that had been going out in the breakaways in the past. Mitchelson, Scott had 2 or 3 riders out of the 5, and they could only get a 10-15 second gap. The peloton was having none of it. Not so much to keep getting riders into the breakaway like in the past recent flatter stages where it was more about the peloton wanting to get their rider into the breakaway, where the breakaway got up to 10 or 15 or 28 riders. In this scenario, it seemed to be more about, yes, some of the teams like Drapek were still trying to get riders into this breakaway, but overall it felt and developed more like the peloton and either the sprint teams like FDJ, Sky, Bora a little bit, and then just overall the rest of the teams were saying no, we just want to get through this day and we don't want anything too crazy to happen with the speeding up to slowing down to speeding up, all the chaos and everything from the breakaway forming, breaking up, and then reforming or remixing. Basically, in the first 10, 15, 20 kilometers, the breakaway got down even to just 8 seconds, an 8 second gap, and then it just kind of held for a while. It stabilized, sort of like the peloton was still thinking about what they were going to do, testing out their plan for the day. And you could kind of see where not just FDJ, but the peloton in general, you could see where they were basically countering or challenging and immediately shutting down as riders tried to get across to that breakaway. So they would basically mark them. So you'd see, let's say, a couple riders from Drapek, or at one point a rider from BMC. They go out to the front of the peloton, they give it a little kick, they get 10, 20, 30 feet out in front of the peloton, and immediately a couple riders would stretch out, catch up to them, and ride right behind them or right next to them. And then you could just see sort of the dejectedness come over those riders who were trying to escape, where then they realize, oh, okay, the harder I push, you're equaling it. So I'm just burning myself out. Meanwhile, I can't really drop you, and I'm expending so much energy. Okay, I'll give up and just go back into the peloton. You can think back to what De Gent said in the past, where he said it's hard enough to get in the breakaway, where you may have to be willing to try 2, 3, 4, 5 times, but then you better be willing physically and mentally to be able to kick it and to just push that hard pace for like 5 to 10 to 15 minutes. I think so many of the riders now are at a weakened state and the fatigue is really setting in on everybody. Yes, there were a ton of attacks. The speed of the peloton overall was very high, but nobody could break away. And as I just kind of said, it was always measured and met by at least 2 or 3 or 4 chasers, including then FDJ and Sky, who were 20, 30 feet back. And so no one was willing to just keep pushing it for more than a minute or two before giving up and going back into the peloton. To give you an idea, in that first 20, 30 kilometers of today's stage, they were hitting 55 to 60 plus kilometers per hour. So the pace was very hard for everyone. So essentially, the whole peloton in general, that's what I'm saying, they really were going to have none of it for a bunch of attacks and a serious breakaway forming and getting way out. Just the overall speed was so high, it limited really anybody but the strongest from being able to escape. With 156 kilometers to go, the peloton is finally settling in a little bit. And the gap is up to about 20 seconds, and then the gap is up to 25 seconds. 4 more riders try to escape. The peloton rides up and shuts it down. And then you need to keep in mind, when a team has somebody out, a team member out in the breakaway, now they are no longer going to do any work because they don't want to help ride the peloton and a rival up to somebody that they have in the breakaway. So that's starting to always be there on any given stage, but of course that's starting to settle in this stage. So you can see the general framework, even with only 8 riders per team, is at the beginning of these stages, you have this setup where you can use 2 riders out in the front of the peloton from your team to mark all those aggressive riders that are trying to stretch out and get into a breakaway or form a breakaway. And those 2 riders from your team can expend that energy to ride up and get next to or ride just behind those people trying to escape the peloton to basically convince them to give up, to break their will, and to sort of show to them, see, it's not worth it, come back into the fold. Meanwhile, that still leaves 5 or 6 riders out of the 8 that can sit back in the peloton, can conserve energy in the slipstream to then have strength to do some kind of a move in the last 20, 30 kilometers of that day's stage. And that's exactly what was going on. Keep in mind, no French team has won a stage yet, and poor Cofidis has not won a stage in 10 years. So within the French teams that ride in the Tour each year, there's that inter-country rivalry where Cofidis has been on the losing end of it for a long time. 149 kilometers to go. The breakaway is sitting at only 15-second gap. Then it gets up to about 25 seconds at 147 kilometers. So you can see it almost doubled in just 2 kilometers. So when the peloton wanted to, they would shut it down a little bit and allow the breakaway to get a little bit more time. But clearly the peloton is toying with the breakaway. And you can see that it's the peloton that is holding all the cards today, where they are allowing the breakaway to be exactly where they're at. Still, they are going about 50 to 53 kilometers per hour. So very fast pacing. 145 kilometers to go. The gap is up to 40 seconds. And at 143 kilometers to go, the gap is at a minute 20. At one point, the breakaway was still doing 45 plus kilometers per hour, where meanwhile the peloton is slowing down to about 35 to 38 kilometers per hour. FDJ is doing a lot of the pacing of the peloton with UAE, United Arab Emirates, I believe. That's Dan Martin's team. This is my speculation based on watching the stage. There's a lot of tired legs out there, and here's what I mean. Okay, so only 5 could get into the breakaway, but really you only had about another 10 or 15 seriously try to escape in those attacks I mentioned. So really, in the previous flatter stages, you would have 10 or 15 trying to break away every couple kilometers for the first 30, 40 kilometers of the stage. And in that one stage, the breakaway didn't even get formed until like 50, 60 kilometers into the stage. There were so many attacks and remixing and reforming where the peloton just kept chasing down the breakaway. So in this case, the peloton was shutting it down, but even with the peloton shutting down, those people really seriously, it looked like maybe 4 or 5 attempts where anywhere from 2 to 3 to 4 or 5 riders would go. And a couple of those tried multiple times. So let's say 15 to 20 max were actually trying seriously to escape from the peloton. So if you think about it, out of 146 riders, eliminate the GC, still though, there should have been another 15, 20 riders trying to escape. So I'm thinking just we're at the point now, tired legs overall. A lot of people are just ready to concede in the sense that they just want to survive to Paris, or they're saving their legs to try to ride a really good time trial, or you're saving it up for tomorrow, the last mountain stage. And some of these guys who are not in GC and who are not really helping GC, it really is just a matter of survival. Bora Sagan's team also was doing some work, but a lot of the work was being done by FDJ. And you kind of think about the expectation. If you are wanting to win a stage, the expectation is you and your team better get up there and help pace the peloton on these flatter stages, or even in the mountain stages, but especially on these flatter stages where there can be winds and they're just very long. They're 160 to 180 or so kilometers long. If you are going to sit back in the peloton and not have you or your team do work, you can see how that would start to really piss off other riders within the tour, and I'm sure there would be some payback. Call it an unwritten rule, call it just honor among gentlemen or among cyclists, but you see that there. So you have Bora's team, FDJ's team, and a little bit of UAE doing their thing with Sky to pace the peloton. And clearly FDJ, which is Demar's team, is establishing hey, our guy DeMar survived the mountains. Our guy DeMar has been close, but no cigar. He hasn't won a stage yet. So they are doing everything they can, even from a symbolic point or a visual point, to say, see, we're doing what we need to do to pace this peloton. So don't bitch on us if we win the stage, or if you want to say that we're undeserving. You know what I mean? Oh, they talked about Alaphilippe and how Alaphilippe, when he heard that Adam Yates went down in that descent, that he was going to hold up because he thought it was more fair and honorable to hold up. But he sort of forgot that, wait, though, not only was Adam Yates a factor, but there were those guys like Izagirre and everything that were only about 15 or 20 seconds behind. So apparently his team director pretty much said, no effing way. Are you crazy? To which Alaphilippe sort of said, huh? Yeah, I guess I am, serious. What do you mean? And then the guy basically said, dude, you've got 4 or 5 other guys only 15, 20 seconds behind you. You really want to flush the stage? To which Alaphilippe said, wait, okay, that's cool. And then he went on and kicked ass and made it to the finish. So kind of interesting insight into Alaphilippe, that he was going to shut it down and wait for Adam Yates to catch up, and then they were going to duke it out mano a mano. 130 kilometers to go. The gap is about a minute, and then it gets up to a minute 15. But pretty much at one point it got up to around 2 minutes plus, but the whole stage predominantly the gap was never more than about a minute to a minute 30. So the peloton was keeping the breakaway close. The breakaway is just being left out there to hang. They're doing about 51 kilometers per hour. So even when things were settling down, they still were doing about 28, 30 miles per hour. 108 kilometers to go, they hit a headwind. That knocked back the speed and the overall effort for both the breakaway and the peloton to where they were doing more about 25, 27 miles per hour. In this stage, there's one last serious climb, or let's say a categorized climb, about 18 kilometers out. So the peloton has to be careful, because if they allow the breakaway to get too close, or if they get too close to the breakaway, and then especially when they hit this last climb, it could induce or entice somebody to try to attack. And if you think about a sprinter like a DeMar or a Cavendish who's out of the race, so it doesn't really matter. So let's just focus on DeMar. Those guys tend to get dropped on those little inclines, which then opens the door to somebody like a Sagan or one of these more all-arounder powerhouse kind of guys like a Bosenhagen or something to jump ahead and then potentially to survive. FDJ and any teams with sprinters, they need to be cautious about how they approach this, to where they don't have a situation where their sprinter gets dropped and then it's too late, or they have to expend too much energy to try to close and get back to the front of the peloton. Well, the breakaway, they're not stupid. They basically realize they're being hung out to dry. So they start to slow down, and they basically force the gap down to around 50 seconds. That does exactly what they wanted, and it does entice a few more guys to try to jump out from the peloton. About 3 guys go for it, from Trek Segafredo and Drapik, which were basically, the Drapik tried to get into the breakaway way back in the beginning. They were one of the few teams that had guys who really were in that 10-15 that were seriously trying to get across. So they see the chance and they go for it. And this is where things don't always work out, where the peloton makes a mistake by allowing the breakaway to stay right around 1.5 minutes, which causes something like this to happen, where the gap gets small enough and new people decide to try to escape. Here's the bizarro thing. So right when these guys from Trek and Drapik attack from the peloton, because the gap is right around 1 minute, and they're trying to get up to those 5 guys in the breakaway, and this is about 100 kilometers out, there's another crash, and guess who's in it? Who are the 2 sad sack hard luck cases in this tour? Okay, you can say Dan Martin a little bit, but who kind of has always had stupid luck? Well, he did win a stage, but overall he has stupid luck, right? He gets caught in crosswinds and everything. Good old Quintana. Quintana goes down in a crash. And Adam Yates, the poor guy who crashed and then lost to Alaphilippe. Weird how in this tour there's been kind of this repetitive thing coming back to bite Adam Yates in the ass again. And then here's Quintana. Remember, Quintana, even on the stage that he won, he hit one of these barriers that was on the side of the road. Everybody else avoids it. He doesn't. And then he needed 2 front wheel changes, or he needed a front wheel change and then an adjustment. And that could have cost him. So anyway, just kind of strange the things that happen. And I wonder if it's because there was some chaos within the peloton when those 3 guys attacked, which maybe caused FDJ and some of these other teams to reassess. And by them reassessing, that caused a little bit of chaos where guys were moving or braking. And then Quintana and Adam Yates weren't totally paying attention or were unlucky and went down. Call it like a nervous reaction, because FDJ, I think, is pretty nervous. So meanwhile, the peloton starts kicking it, because FDJ, I think, being nervous, doesn't want to risk them losing control of this stage. Because now, instead of just having those 5 guys out in the breakaway, you've got 3 going to join them, and that might reinvigorate this breakaway. And this is at like 9,500 kilometers out. So still enough time, but FDJ is taking no chances. So here's Quintana, banged up. We'll have to see how this affects Quintana going into tomorrow and the time trial, but he's 40 seconds back. So he's got to ride with a couple teammates hard when they've already been going, 45 to 55 kilometers per hour. He now has to kick it just to try to catch up to the back of the stupid peloton. Things kind of broke apart. The 3 who jumped out got pulled back. FDJ reestablished control. So you have the breakaway of the original 5 with about a 2-minute gap. And then once again, it's staying right there at 1:30 to 2 minutes. And now we're at about 80, 85 kilometers to go to the finish. So FDJ is driving the peloton again. And once again, they let the gap get down to about a minute. But I think they were taking a calculated risk at this point, because they know to the point in this stage, they've been able to contain all these attempts at a breakaway. The overall peloton has helped them to contain all these attempts to break away. Even when the 3 just went around 85 kilometers to go, they were able to bring it back. So I think they're just taking a calculated risk that it's still worth it to keep this breakaway of 5, the original, right around a minute, so that they don't risk blowing it, so that they can manage the last part of the stage. And the calculated risk being, 1, everybody's legs are tired. So based on this point in the stage, in the final phase, and then this point in the tour, having ridden so many miles, nobody is really going to want to do it. No one's really going to want to try again. And that was basically true. FDJ's calculated risk worked out. And they're starting to get a tailwind as they get down to around 40 kilometers to go. 26 kilometers to go. They're doing anywhere from 50 plus kilometers per hour. And at points where the road is dropping a little bit, they're hitting 60, 65 kilometers per hour. So at this point, you can forget trying to escape on a breakaway. Now it's just hold on to your hats kind of thing. 18 kilometers to go. This is that final climb. And the breakaway is getting caught. There's only maybe 10 seconds. And now, again, a last try, Jack Bauer, Dan Martin, Simon Clark, and a few others jump out of the peloton. And they stretch up and they catch up to the 5. So a chance for one more breakaway to form. Was it that risk for FDJ to allow everything to stay too close? And will people get dropped on this category 4? No. The FDJ was having no part of it. The whole peloton is having no part of it. FDJ clearly, kind of like Quintana, has targeted this stage and had a very good tactical plan, and they're implementing it because they immediately chase, and within a few seconds, they shut it down. From 16 kilometers to go to the finish, FDJ is basically establishing their control once again over the front of the peloton. But as they go in through 15, 14, 13 kilometers, you have Bora out there. You have Bahrain Merida out there. You have Drapic out there even. And then this point, FDJ is even back a little bit. Like they're back maybe 25 feet. So they've been basically leading the peloton for 90% of the race. And now suddenly in the last 7-8 kilometers or so, they're actually back 3 places behind these other teams. As I get into the final kilometer, there's the last key bend, and then there's a straightaway, and then a softer bend, and then the last 500 meters. Damar, he gets a beautiful lead out. FDJ reestablish your control over the very front. So it's in the last 500-600 meters, you have Damar's lead out man, Damar, and then Laporte, and then everybody else behind. And Sagan clearly is either tired or he is in pain, or he has some injuries that are lingering, or just soreness from his crash, because he's back like 8-9 places. And that's unusual for a Sagan. So Damar finally gets his lead out. Team FDJ wins. Damar gets it, and Laporte bitches a little bit, but whatever point that Laporte had, it's the same point that every sprinter has that comes in second or third. It was a legit win. And here's the thing. So, okay, most of the sprinters, Groenewegen, Greipel, Kittel, Gaviria are out of the race. Cavendish out of the race. But here's the thing. You still got to give it to Damar. One, remember in the previous stages, Damar got a perfect lead out just like he did today. And Damar was leading. And then here comes Christophe and Sagan, or a second rider and Sagan. And then Sagan came from third place and ended up winning the stage. And Damar got like third. So this is vindication for Damar's team, FDJ, doing everything right, the correct technique. But guess what? Like that previous stage, you can have perfect technique and get the perfect lead out, and somebody like Sagan still comes and kicks your ass in the last 15 or 20 meters. Okay, a little bit of luck again. Sagan's banged up. Sagan's probably sore. A bunch of sprinters have been eliminated. But still, you got to hand it to FDJ. They had their tactical plan. They took the calculated risk of leaving the breakaway within 2 minutes. They contained it when there were breakaways. They got the perfect lead out, and Damar did his thing and finally got the stage win. So cool. So now, after I've just been mentioning that France hasn't had a team win a stage this year, they won a stage. So that's checked off. Or maybe the conspiracy theorists or whatever can say all this stuff's contrived to a certain extent, and so it had to be contrived for a French team to win. That's whatever. And then, hey, you also have to give Damar credit, because unlike all the other sprinters, he survived all these brutal days. He survived the Alps. Damar survived the Pyrenees. That's a testament that sometimes you win just because your legs are a little bit fresher, or you basically survived. Bravo, good job, and on to stage 19. So looking forward into stage 19. Something to think about. There's those hardcore climbs at the end, and then a long descent. So will somebody like Bardet, who now is just sitting there in top 10 and had a disappointing day yesterday and dropped to 8th place, is this maybe an opportunity if he has the legs? It always boils down to, it doesn't matter what the plan is or what sounds like a good idea. It just comes down to whether these people have strong enough legs. Because, again, why would you try to fox somebody if you really have the legs? Why not just do like a Quintana and go balls out and get 45 seconds to 2 minutes on people? Same thing with Froome. When Froome was dropping yesterday, going up to Col de Porte, if he's foxing, why do that? Why not just go for the kick and then go for another kick and then just drop everybody and gain 30, 40 seconds? So all this being said, though, is tomorrow a day where maybe a Bardet, who isn't a big threat on GC now, he can get himself over that last climb with like 20, 30 seconds on like Froome and the GC group, hold on then the descent, and then win the stage. He has a problem, though. Okay, Dan Martin might be thinking the same thing, but maybe they can work together, and then it's just who descends the fastest. And then who's out there, and who do we already know who can kick ass on the descent? Alaphilippe. So wouldn't it be an exciting stage tomorrow if Dan Martin and Bardet and then Alaphilippe can link up and maybe go over as 1, 2, 3, or 5 or 8 or 10 seconds apart, and then have a race on the descent and let the best man win, and then win that stage since they aren't going to be on the podium. And I don't really see too many of the GC riders going for that because Roglic is going to make his move on the TT, and Froome is seeming to be gassed, and besides, he has to protect Geraint Thomas now, and Dumoulin is going to be targeting Geraint Thomas. That's the other thing. Dumoulin, what if he can gain 10 seconds on Geraint Thomas on the descent, because Geraint Thomas is not the best descender, and he's crashed. And so then if Dumoulin can nick into Geraint Thomas, then if Dumoulin can crush Geraint Thomas in the time trial, he could potentially get himself into yellow. And that would be pretty dramatic too. It'll be hard to, if there is that potential, it's going to be hard on Saturday to wait until the last few guys go on the time trial to then see what results they get. But otherwise, Roglic, Kruijswijk, Mikkel Landa, I think they're just going to be trying to protect their GC standing, and they will only attack tomorrow if they see that Geraint Thomas and Froome are cracking in any way. But I think Sky is too squared away. They have Bernal and Kwiatkowski. That's the other thing, too. Kwiatkowski, he is a good descender. He's been the one shepherding Geraint Thomas down these descents. So if they can attack Team Sky tomorrow and get him dropped and force Geraint Thomas to descend on his own, that's a chance then for Dumoulin and anybody else to gain time on him, because he can know that he can give up 10, 15, 20 seconds on the descent so he doesn't crash, knowing that he has that buffer, but still that will put more pressure on Geraint Thomas going into the time trial. Okay, take it easy.